Good evening and welcome to the Coon Rapids City Council meeting for Tuesday, March 17th, 2020. If you could please rise and join us for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Kraskowiak.
Here.
Councilmember Kicker.
Here.
Councilmember Demmer.
Here.
Councilmember Geisler.
Here.
Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Wells.
Here.
Mayor Cook.
Here. Thank you. First item on our agenda then is to adopt this evening's agenda.
Your Honor,
Councilmember Demmer.
move to adopt the agenda, adding an item 9, which is declaring local emergency.
Second.
Motion by Demmer, second by Geisler. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the agenda is adopted. And we are up to item 1, which is the approval of the minutes from the March 4th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Geisler, second by Wells to approve the minutes of the March 4th, 2020 meeting. Any discussion or corrections? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries. We have 3 items on our consent agenda this evening. And the first one is to approve the off-sale 3.2% malt liquor license for holiday number 3514, 1855 Gateway Drive, Coon Rapids. The application for liquor licensing has been submitted, the investigation and license fees have been paid, and the certificate of liquor liability insurance has been submitted. The police department is currently conducting background investigations on the applicants. The issuance of the off-sale 3.2% liquor license is contingent upon successful background investigations and final approval by the Minnesota Alcohol and Gambling Enforcement Division. So we're looking to approve an off-sale 3.2% liquor license for Lynn Retail Centers Incorporated, doing business as Holiday Store 3514, 1855 Gateway Drive Northwest, conditioned upon successful background checks and final approval by the Minnesota Alcohol and Gambling Enforcement Division. The next item on our agenda is to adopt Resolution 20-35, authorizing donation of playground equipment. Playground equipment is being replaced at Woodland Oaks Park in 2020. Staff is requesting authorization to donate the old equipment to the nonprofit organization Kids Around the World Incorporated. This organization renovates used park equipment and reinstalls it in underprivileged areas around the world. The city has made donation to kids in the past. So we're looking to approve Resolution 20-35, authorizing a donation of used playground equipment to Kids Around the World Incorporated, a nonprofit organization, and to approve the agreement with Kids Around the World Incorporated for playground equipment removal and authorize the execution of the agreement by appropriate city officials. The third item on our consent agenda, which is the 4th item on our agenda this evening, and the final consent agenda item, is to consider nominations to the Coon Creek Watershed District Board of Managers. It has been requested by Anoka County that the City Council make nominations to fill positions on the Coon Creek Watershed District Board of Managers. Staff advertised the vacancy on the city's website and received 5 letters of interest. The 5 candidates include Christopher Geisler, Newell Chester, Justin Wilkins, Gary Olson, and Adam Morris. All candidates are Coon Rapids residents interested in serving on this board, and a summary of the candidates is attached. The Anoka County Board of Commissioners is the entity responsible for the appointment of these positions. However, the City Council may make recommendations for the Anoka County Board to consider. The letter attached to this memorandum provides an explanation of the nomination and appointment process, and staff recommends that the City Council make formal nominations to the Coon Creek Watershed District Board of Managers. And that's our whole consent agenda.
Your Honor,
Councilmember Demmer.
move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by Demmer, second by Kicker. Any discussion?
Just a quick question. In support of your motion to forward the consent agenda, are you considering all 5 candidates as nominations for the Coon Creek Watershed District?
That was my understanding of this.
Yep. Okay, just wanted to make that clear. Okay. Thank you.
All right. And I do like the, let's see here, it came from, no, I can't even find it. But it came from the staff advertised a vacancy on the city's website and received 5 letters of interest. One of them specifically said he listened to the city council meeting and heard us putting a plea out.
Oh, he
Just
was the
wanted-
one.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, so there's at least one guy that watches.
And, Mr. Mayor, when we put the list to the board, can we highlight that Coon Rapids is a very large area, probably the largest area within the Coon Creek watershed, and we currently don't have representation to encourage a greater consideration for that fact as they look at our list of nominees.
Yes, very good. Any other discussion?
Your Honor,
Councilmember Wells?
do we make no recommendations other than just forwarding the names?
Right, we nominate at least 3, and here we have 5 that we're nominating. So the way I understand it, and I'm open to doing it a different way, but we would be forwarding all 5 names as potential candidates without any further recommendation.
Obviously, I don't necessarily want to talk about it at a public meeting, but I would be extremely disappointed if someone on this list was given that position.
Okay.
Yeah, and then without any feedback, it's kind of hard to control that.
I think that makes sense. I think we need to actually talk to the Anoka County Board of Commissioners, and I think they know how we feel, but it is definitely time for Coon Rapids to have representation on that board. I totally agree. I'm glad we have 5 candidates. Thanks for stepping up.
And I do share independently my recommendations and preferences, but I don't make that a part of the forwarding of interested citizens who are wanting to have a role in their local government.
Right. We have to put forward at least 3 for them to seriously consider our list.
Right.
And we have 5, so they're going to have to seriously consider the list. Whether they pick from it or not, I don't know. All right, any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the consent agenda is adopted. We are down to new business, and that is to consider a driveway access agreement for the Lindgren property. And the Lindgrens are the owners of a parcel located to the west of Hummingbird Street at 127th Avenue. I'm assuming that without Mr. Harlicker here, we don't have like a show for this, right?
We do not, and I apologize, I did have a location map for this document, for this thing that would have probably been helpful, but that's not in there. If you look at the driveway agreement on page 6, there is a location map that sort of shows it, the picture of it, but we don't have any other formal presentation than that. I am here for questions, if necessary.
Okay. And you're wearing 2 hats this evening, right?
I
You are
am.
our acting city manager, and you're still our city attorney.
Yes.
All right.
And I think that's a conflict of interest, don't you?
Don't worry, they're only paying me for one.
You get to pick which one.
All right. The Lindgrens are the owners of a parcel located to the west of Hummingbird Street at 127th Avenue. The property is south of Woodland Oaks Park and north of Woodland Heights Park. The property currently does not have access to an improved public roadway. The city has an unimproved dedicated right-of-way, 127th Avenue, that runs from Hummingbird Street to the property. The Lindgrens are seeking temporary access to their property and have been talking to the city for several years regarding access to Hummingbird Street via the right-of-way. In consideration of permitting the installation of a driveway from Hummingbird Street to the property, the Lindgrens would grant a utility, right-of-way, and trail easement across the south 60 feet of Lindgren's property. This would provide a public benefit to the city and its residents by providing for the potential future extension of 127th Avenue from Hummingbird Street to the area commonly known as the Balcony property. While the city and the Lindgrens would execute the agreement, it would not become effective until the property is developed. All right. So, and you know what? I'm an avid planning commission watcher, and I was out of town and did not watch this one.
This did not go to the planning commission.
Well, this
is
didn't
not-
go to the planning commission. I don't
No.
feel, so maybe I didn't miss one then. I thought, I don't remember anything about
This
this.
is
You
a different
confessed something
agreement.
you didn't have to.
No, this is across our right of way. It's a little bit unusual, but we think, and like I said, but for getting that public benefit, we probably wouldn't do this. And so that's why we're presenting it to the council. And as indicated in the last sentence, until they actually have some building site plan for that lot, they won't be putting in a driveway, and essentially we won't get our easement. It will only become effective at that time. And so, because it just seems to make sense. So this is just so that he's able to market the property, that it does have access. And then, like I said, in exchange, we're gonna get that ability, if necessary, to put in that roadway, or at minimum, we'll have a trail potential through there, or utilities that may need to go in there. So in some ways, we think it's a win-win for both parties.
So, and my only question on this is because the chair of our Parks Commission presented this to me when the first went on the market. And he thought this would be a great opportunity for us to get a north-south trail connection to connect those parks. So when I first read this and I read about the easement, I went, okay, well, no, that sounds great. Well, then I read it and I went, across the south, well, that doesn't get us our trail easement. And I'm just wondering, we're gonna get one bite at this apple, and I'm just wondering if this is gonna satisfy what we need.
I'd have to defer to Mr. Himmer on what our overall park plan is, or a trail plan for that. Maybe he can address that if this at least gets us something until the future. I know it's a low priority, but, like I said, I don't know if Mr. Himmer has anything more to add to that.
Mr. Mayor, Council, I was just actually pulling up the master trail plan to take a look at that. It does show a future trail connection kind of on the north side of the creek in this general area. So there's a ditch that runs through the property to the north, which is city property, and then a connection off of the Hummingbird cul-de-sac to the north into that trail system, but nothing specifically through this site. Any connection is a connection, certainly, but I'm just looking at the map now that's on the city website, and we all know with park and trail plans, since the referendum, this is evolving all the time. So this is what it was at the beginning, 18 months ago.
So, so this is actually still gonna have to come back for a development plan, right? Unless it's gonna be sold as one lot?
And it may be just sold as one lot. I think that's the current plan for it.
Oh,
If it's subdivided, then potentially yes. But I think at this point, it's being marketed as a single lot. I think it has a lot of issues with it in terms of the creek there and things like that, and the soils, so I'm not sure they can get much more than one lot out of it. The other part of maybe too is it might become part of that larger development if anything goes in that Belfany side, but at this point, there is no connection between the two properties.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Griscoviac?
I have the same concerns or questions that you have. It seems like in terms of regarding a public benefit on the easement, it seemed like it would make more sense if there was a trail easement on the west side of the property, so that would be between Woodland Park and Woodland Oaks Park, because right now there's a footpath along the drainage ditch that starts in Hummingbird, right along the Hummingbird cul-de-sac there. So I'm just wondering if that would be feasible or possible. To me, it would make more sense to connect those two parks.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we need that easement across the south for the road to connect.
Right.
But if we just have the one lot, I'm just wondering. Unfortunately, we're a little bit skeletal tonight.
Yes, unfortunately we are. A couple of things. Mr. Lindgren is in the audience. I don't know, he doesn't have a potential buyer at this point. I don't know if he's willing to simply table this matter today and we can have a discussion at this point to figure out those issues, present something back to Mr. Lindgren. And that gives him an opportunity to at least take a look at it versus seeing if he's agreeable on the spot here. And that way we can provide the proper information to him.
Okay.
And kind of given where we're at tonight, that might be the most appropriate route if the council does have concerns.
Mr. Mayor? Go ahead.
Mr. Himmer? Did you
Yeah,
have
Mr. Mayor, Council, and I won't speak for Mr. Lindgren, but part of this development or easement contemplates a single lot. If he should ever choose to do a second lot, that would come with a lot split that would be required. That would come with the roadway construction and other things that come with that piece. But as Mr. Brody had mentioned, there's floodplain on the property, there's this very significant sanitary sewer easement on the property. So absent really some wetland mitigation, floodplain mitigation, without some significant investment and work, the likelihood that a second lot would occur is minimal. However, anything in this day and age is possible, but that would require a lot split. That could be done administratively, obviously, but based upon maybe some of the conversation, if we move forward with this tonight, that would be conditioned on that additional item or included in this document, that any lot split would require kind of a council action. And Mr. Lindgren may want to speak to that differently.
It's a significant size lot, so even if the land is, maybe we wouldn't put the trail in, but it seems like it would be nice to have the ability to add it later if we wanted it.
If there's a
I'm
plan.
not sure. Councilmember Johnson, Jessen?
Well, I'm just saying if there's a plan to do it, if that's something that is on the horizon somewhere.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm not certain about that.
No, and nor am I. I just know that the chair of the Parks Commission was very, very interested in this connection. And I don't know if they ever went anywhere with a conversation on it, or, I'm sorry, was there somebody down here?
It was discussed, Mr. Mayor, at the Park and Rec, and the cost. Is it buying land for the future potentially, or would you rather use those park funds for actual infrastructure? And you're right, there is a park to the south, there is a park to the north. This is directly in between. That's a connecting piece between the two. There is ditches, as I said. There's easements. It's very difficult with the way this is laid out. And Mr. Lindgren had a possibility for a lot split, but it doesn't meet any requirements today. It hasn't passed any permitting through the city and or Watershed to even make that a viable option. And the only way that is viable is to extend a roadway, build the roadway, extend the utility services and things that would come above and beyond this service and singular driveway.
All right.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Kraskowiak?
one, I think if we had a map of this and some diagrams, it would be easier for us to make a decision, and I know it's just absent on this one. But I think it would make it easier for me to come to a decision on this, to grant this temporary access, this driveway access, if I knew that footpath that comes out of the park along that drainage ditch, that might not even be on Mr. Lindgren's property to begin with, so it might be a completely moot point. Can someone confirm that, exactly where his property ends?
It's on the north side of the creek in the city park land that's designated there.
So there's a strip of city land between these two parks that we could potentially utilize? Or is that Belfany property?
Belfany property. So this would get
okay.
us over to the Belfany property. There's
Okay.
a little disconnect then in that piece.
Okay, there's like a Woodland Oaks Park and a Woodland Heights Park.
Right.
And then
Right.
there's this in-between kind of no man's land, well,
Right.
property.
And I remember talking about this a little bit. I was in that meeting, and I didn't recall that it was actually on the property. So I think in the future, if we wanted to connect those with a trail, I think it would be outside of this property, I guess, on the west side, so.
We would either have to extend west through the Belfany property and up, or if you were to go at some point north to south on this property that we're talking about, you could reach the city park. But the existing trail is on the opposite side of the creek. And again, there are floodplain, wetland issues that come with that. To try to construct any home, any trail, anything else, it would come with mitigation and other analysis.
Okay.
I'm gonna try to find a picture for you.
Council, what are your desires on this?
Your Honor.
Councilmember Demmer?
So I am always very happy to let someone have access to their own property. So I think that ultimately we will end up approving it. But it feels like we, and through no fault of the landowner, maybe need a little more time to figure out what we actually want to ask. are people feeling that way, that if we put it off for one meeting, everyone's okay? Knowing that we're not putting it off to say no, we're putting it off to figure out what we're saying yes to?
I can only speak for myself. I just don't feel like I have enough information here, and it's kind of like my bad. Usually I would dig in and I would pull the aerials and the GIS stuff before I got here, and I mistakenly, like I said, I didn't read it that it was across the south, and then I went, well, wait a minute, that isn't what I was thinking about here. So I would like a little more time to look at it, but that's up to you, council.
Where, for me, looking at it, it's access to land that is his land. That anything that has to happen on that, unless it's a single-family home, would have to come back through all of the processes, whether it's a lot split, a site plan, any of those kinds of things. And at that point, it would be, where is the best place, and would we want to look at some other sort of connection or trail? But right now, it's really that, can I have access to my land? And that's what's in front of us, and I don't know with where this access is coming through, would that ever necessarily be considered from a trail perspective?
May I ask a question?
Councilmember Johnson?
So it's not, there is a little map that's attached, as Mr. Himmer indicated, to the attachments to our agenda, but it doesn't show the full property. Is this, because of the nature of the evolution of the land in the area, is this essentially a landlocked parcel, that this would be the only access to that land? Or are there other accesses to the land?
Councilmember Johnson, members of the council, this is a landlocked parcel. This
Okay.
127th Avenue dedication is the only way to it, which is where it gets a little concerning that we're gonna allow one individual the driveway access over something that's dedicated to the public. And so what's kind of the trade-off of the benefit of getting that access?
Right, but, so I am a little curious, because I am looking at the map, and there are surrounding subdivided lots. And yet there's this, you know, the potential future extension of 127th, I suppose, is there. But is that there essentially and wasn't lotted off because there was some old cart path that went over to this property? Do you know why that was left undeveloped, or was it dedicated as a potential street extension?
It was dedicated on two separate plats, half off of each, to provide access to vacant property
Okay.
to the west, which is then the question of how do we extend that even further to the next vacant parcel
Right.
to the west of that.
But if we did ever build out that extension, then he would have access to his property.
That is correct.
right.
And that's.
I'm ready to vote.
I do have a couple of images that I can share, actually quite a few. I'll put this down. So first of all, I'll show you the wetland delineation. I don't know if they can help me with this in any way, shape, or form. You can see maybe is kind of this whole southwesterly corner, this yellow line that cuts across here. This whole southwesterly corner is wetland, so it's unbuildable.
21st century technology there.
I'm sorry, it's computer.
There we go. It's
There we
coming
go.
in. It's coming in.
All right, I'm gonna have to hold it at a right angle, so,
Or a proper one, anyway.
So obtuse.
there we go. Then I'm gonna move to kind of what was an exhibit that we had. So there's that same parcel again, the thick drainage and utility easement, which is a sanitary trunk line that runs through the site. So if I'm saying now that wetland was kind of this corner over here, this quadrant.
Yep.
You've got this that cuts through, you've got an individual home. I'm hitting the keyboard. So any kind of a lot split that's going to exist kind of creates the inability to get a second lot in there, absent mitigation, vacation, relocation of a sanitary trunk. So it's extremely difficult to do. And I guess in that scenario, if I'm talking to Mr. Lindgren, if we were kind of off in this corner here and we look to say, can we get a 10-foot drainage and utility easement up the west side of that property through the wetland to the city park, would you be opposed to that? I think he shook his head no.
Yeah.
It just is gonna be very difficult for a second home to be built, and I guess if he's open to saying, yeah, go ahead and build a trail through a wetland if that works for you, and we link you to the park, and he's agreeable to that, and Mr. Brody, city manager, city attorney, can agree that we can amend this in some fashion, or we table it, come back and handle it a different way.
I have only one follow-up question.
Do you need my pictures anymore?
No.
Councilmember Johnson?
So, that ends up being a really long driveway. And I'm aware of at least one, maybe two other properties in Coon Rapids where we ended up with really long driveways that were either on or evolved into a public right-of-way. And then we end up plowing them for years and years and repairing driveways and putting in pavement and stuff like that. When this is said and done, is it the idea that the responsibility for repair and maintenance of the driveway that's there would be the private landowner?
Councilmember Johnson, that is correct. In addition to the document spelling out, they have to maintain it, they have to still run a water line in underneath this driveway. They have to maintain that water line all the way to Hummingbird Street,
Yep.
not somewhere else along the way. That's what this agreement contemplates, is it's yours to put in at your cost, it's yours to maintain. If for whatever reason a subdivision happens in the future where you try for a second lot, at that time, the driveway goes away, you must construct a road over, bring in public utilities to serve both sites, and all of those costs would be borne as part of that lot split.
So we would still, in theory, if we wanted to extend that road, we would still be able to extend that road?
That's correct.
Okay. But then he would still have, he'd have a shorter driveway then, he'd still have his access.
We would build the road across through the front, the property would be assessed the same way any other home would be assessed for construction of a public street.
All right, I lied when I said I had one more question, so I'm done.
Sorry.
I'm ready.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Griscoviac?
I think that diagram that you laid out clarifies it for us. 127th, there's an easement for 127th from Hummingbird all the way over to Shenandoah, I think, across the Belfany property. So if that is ever developed, which is kind of unlikely with that property, it would supersede and go over his driveway at that point. So I'd be in favor of this.
Yeah, me too.
And there's no possibility we would ever put a trail in over there, even though we could have access to the land. It just wouldn't be feasible?
Are you saying to ever construct a trail through there?
Yeah.
I'll never say never, Mr. Mayor.
No,
Can,
there you go.
you know, we're talking about Coon Creek. There are opportunities to do that, yes.
It just seems
Mitigation
like-
comes with it.
It seems like it would not impact that parcel. When you look at it, it would be very difficult to get a second lot in there. And it's so wide and it's beyond the easement, it just seems like if we could have a trail easement through there, it wouldn't impact the sale. And Mr. Lindgren, I thought he said was okay with that.
And it would create enough of a buffer away from whatever home is constructed on the opposite side of a wetland. If he's agreeable to that, it's probably a lot different than if we said run it up the drainage and utility easement. And I think the further away you get, the better off he'd probably be for it. And it's going to put us right in the middle of a wetland. But it gives the opportunity, yes, for that to happen. And if the Balfany farm ever developed, maybe a different route gets configured. But it leaves open the possibility, which is always a good thing to do.
Your Honor,
Councilmember Johnson?
I'm going to move that the council approve driveway agreement with Bruce and Irene Lindgren and authorize the mayor and city manager to execute the agreement. And I hope if the council votes in favor of this, that the city can still continue to have conversations with Mr. Lindgren and his family about possible future trails. Thank you.
Second.
I don't.
Do we want to
At that
build-
point, then we would have to do compensation for it,
Do we
but
want to do something a little more specific? I think Mr. Lindgren is in agreement to that 10-foot
Well,
trail,
Mr. Mayor, if I
Yeah.
might.
or 10-foot easement.
The lot development would have to go through planning, and at planning, they'd have to play park dedication, either, wouldn't they?
It's already got the one plot.
Not if
They
it's a
split it.
single lot.
Not if it's a single
Not
lot.
if it's a single lot. And if it does get split into
If it
two, this
splits, then-
agreement would
I see.
terminate and we'd start over again.
How wide is the trail system there?
How wide is
The trail? 10 foot?
Right along that ditch.
I'm not sure on
What do you
that.
want, what are you suggesting is a more specific addition to the motion that's recommended by
If
staff?
Mr. Lindgren is in agreement, I would just say on the 10 feet on the is it the west side of the property line? Or is it
Westerly side.
westerly side. And then we'd amend the agreement to reflect that when we have the final agreement.
So in consideration for?
The same thing, it'd be included with the other consideration. The other easements that are being provided. So in addition to.
So in addition, okay, so recommend that, so the council, my motion is then that the council approve, I'll restate my motion, that the council approve the driveway agreement with Bruce and Irene Lindgren and authorize the mayor and city manager to execute the agreement with the added consideration of a 10-foot easement along the westerly side of the property for a trail.
And I would still second that.
Are we okay with that, Mr. City Attorney Hat?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
And then we'll modify the agreement and.
Mr. Himmer?
Yes, Council, Mr. Mayor, I was just talking to Mr. Lindgren. He's agreeable to a trail easement. I guess if there's a way to maybe separate the two conversations, that this stays the way it is and we negotiate with him a trail easement as a separate document that we can bring back to you at a separate date. I'll let you guys mull that over, but he's not opposed to a trail. He just says, you know, will you ever construct a trail if the other property doesn't develop? I'm happy to give you that trail easement. If there's a way to separate the documents, and maybe Mr. Brody can say whether one is cleaner than the other, but he's not opposed to it. He just would like to maybe think about it or talk about it. But I'll leave that, I'll let him speak for himself if he wants to come
Well,
up
and
address
I
it.
would just say that, as part of my motion, it's not, the specific location and legal description, if you will, of the trail is not yet, I mean, we don't have that. So that's not been presented to us. So that's a separate document or a separate thing that can be worked out. And if that consideration can't be agreed upon, then it fails of consideration.
So and it will be, we can put a separate document together for that.
Yeah.
That will, like I said, it become, like this particular easement that we've talked about already, doesn't become effective until the building site until that happens. Same with this, and we can put it in a separate document as well. And then if we have further discussions that need to come back in front of council, we will.
Yeah, and I want to make clear that the motion that I'm making, which I believe was seconded, and I hope there's clarity on that if city staff and Mr. and Mrs. Lindgren can't get together with the specifics of the location and description of that trail, then this fails. This does not proceed because it fails of the consideration that is sought.
I would
So-
agree.
At which point we could
We could
vote on something else.
And we all could reconsider and come back to the table with something else. But I think I'm hoping this leaves both parties with the opportunity to have a conversation of what that would look like.
Okay. Any other discussion? Do we need to restate, or we got the motion?
We have a
right?
pretty clear
Second.
motion.
All right. No further discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries.
Ooh, I didn't know that was going to go unanimous.
Well, no, well, with that last
That was
little
the part we
caveat,
needed.
that last little change there. All right. We're at item 6 now. There we go.
I'm fine, and I agree
Consider
with
planning case 19-2, consider resolution 20-36, granting final plat, Port Riverwalk Second Edition, Centra Homes. The proposed final plat includes platting 42 lots, 9 on Bluebird Street, 16 on Avocet Street, and 17 on the private street north of 100th Avenue. The proposed final plat is consistent with the approved preliminary plat, and the remaining undeveloped portions of the project are platted as outlots. Does anybody have any questions on this or need anything else covered?
What's this project?
Right. I love that one lone house
Yeah.
that came out of the ground there.
Progress.
I think the irony is that I was planning to like go toast when this finally got approved fully, and now the bars are closed.
Well, look,
So,
shop
Your
is still
Honor.
open. Yeah. Councilmember Demmer.
In planning case 19-2, move for approval of resolution 20-36, granting final plat approval for Port Riverwalk Second Edition with the stated conditions.
Second.
Motion by Demmer, second by Geisler. Discussion?
It was very exciting to see
Yeah.
something start there, and hopefully there'll be more there, and a whole lot of showcased homes that people can go
I
check
spent
out.
I spent about 10 minutes driving around taking pictures of it from all the sides. Councilmember Demmer?
So, because Councilmember Geisler and I each got a question about some trees being taken down near this site, just wanted to let people know it has nothing to do with this site. It's an expansion of the parking lot of the Elo Jacobs building.
And building.
And building, so it's not this.
Not
Not-
not even a city thing.
Yeah,
Right.
right. It's school district, and more
Right.
technically, it's the River Trail Learning Center.
Sorry.
Right.
Yeah. yeah.
Yes,
That also
because everyone
hurts
knows
feelings.
that name.
All right, any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries. And we are on to item 7, to consider adopting resolution 20-37, amending the facility construction fund budget for additional costs to replace the city center roof. Let's see, so we're looking at modification to the 2020 facility construction fund budget to allow for additional expenditures of $150,000 above the $1 million budget to replace the roof for the city center. The budget of $1 million was estimated in mid-2019 before actual bids were accepted for the roof replacement. The bids came in higher than originally expected, and additional funds are also needed to pay a consultant for developing the plans, specifications, and inspections for the new roof. Funds are available in the fund balance of the facility construction fund. And Mr. Himmer, you were happy we had 4 bids on that or something, or?
Yes, we had a total of 5 bids.
Okay.
5 bids. Actually, I shouldn't say that, it was 4. I just couldn't look, I can look at the memo and I'm not looking at that
You just wanted to
right
correct
now.
me.
I'm not looking at the memo.
4 bids. Councilmember Demmer?
So, Mr. Himmer, the ask here for an extra $150,000, in the next thing we're going to talk about, it said that the low bid was, $1,057,000. So just clarifying that you need the $150,000 for what?
So we're roughly $60,000 over what was budgeted. I've got about $60,000 in consulting fees and a $30,000 contingency in
Yep.
case something comes about. So just, I don't want to come back for another 5 or
And-
10 or something else later.
And that's what I thought you were gonna say, so I just wanna double check, is a $30,000 contingency enough?
Yes.
Okay,
Good answer,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Himmer.
I'm just gonna look down here before
I do have a question,
okay,
actually.
then I won't make a
You
motion.
knew I did. You knew
Won't make a
Well,
motion.
you can make a motion, that's fine.
No.
All right. Councilmember Skoviak.
So I was kind of wondering why this is, why 8, agenda item 8 isn't in the bid openings and contract awards, and it's probably because of this. But I'm just, it kind of goes to the next agenda item as to the cost on this. For this type of roof, the range, I was looking at this, the cost of the material and the labor is between $5 and $12 a square foot, and that's in 2020 dollars. And I'm wondering, we're at $17 a square foot, so could be the reason why we're over budget, of course, but I would like to know why so much more?
Councilmember Griscoviac, members of the council, one of the things is prevailing wage requirements that the city has. It's something I'm doing some research on currently, as it was adopted in the 80s and updated in the 90s. There are lots of projects that we do that any project that exceeds $100,000 currently in the city by our ordinance requires prevailing wage. So that increases project costs depending on what those projects are. So that is creating a problem for us. One of the other issues is you've got different shapes and configurations to the roof and some of the drainage features that exist today. You get a lot of water spilling out over the edges because it's not properly pitched on the roof itself to get to the drainage scuppers, so there's some work to do about that. We did a bunch of test cuts throughout, and there are some areas that need some additional insulation as well. That wasn't contemplated at the time when we just looked at what's a good budget number to get us here. So all of those factors together kind of point us to the fact that two were good, right within each other. Others were 1.2, 1.5. It's not ideal when we budget at the time that we do, but I think all of those factors together put us in this scenario. I mean, again, we can rebid this. We can look at a different type of roof. We can go through a different process, certainly. I know we've done that in other instances before. This gets us a roof with a long longevity to it. It gives us ability to, I've heard solar and other items that exist, you know, how that abuts to this dome within this portion of the building. It's not a typical building, and there are different limitations. So I'll babble some more if you'd like, or I'm certainly if you got any more pointed or specific questions, I'll try to help answer it. But I will say prevailing wages is one that really is upping those costs, especially in this day and age. And I intend to bring some conversation to you in a work session to talk about impacts to that and why it exists, where it came from, what do we want to do with it.
Well, since you asked me to continue on, I think I will. And the other point that I would like to make, and again, tied to the next agenda item, and actually the agenda item under that, is that this will be a $1 million project, and I'm wondering if we're considering a state of emergency, which actually, for the city, which I'll let you know I'm not in favor of right now, but, and the conditions that we have right now around COVID-19, is this a good time to be undertaking a project of this magnitude? Or should we defer this maintenance and, make sure that we just focus on core public services, police, fire, water, sanitation? So those are some of the things on my mind, and that all three of the next agenda items are all kind of tied together that way. So my question then would be, do you think with these conditions that we're having right now, are we going to be able to even get the project done on time, on scope?
Councilmember Scovia, Council, I guess I can't speak towards
Right.
what a contractor or consultant is going to do. I mean, we're business as usual. We're reactive to what other people are going to do with road reconstruction projects, rehab projects, certainly. I did talk to Fran earlier today just to make sure the fund balance for the facility construction fund after all currently budgeted improvements would be close to 1.9 million at the end of 2020. So that is with everything that's budgeted being done. So this would come out of the facility construction fund that has that fund balance. With regard to deferment, we deferred it from last year. And each year you find more tiles. If Julianne was here, she could speak to how many times she's had a bucket on her desk in her office. It's been deferred enough that this is a time that if we're not going to do it now, we're just going to be spending money, putting patches and repairs together to ultimately do this improvement eventually. You get to decide beyond that how you want to
Yeah.
spend the money.
Yeah. So I have a friend that owns a commercial roofing company that looked at these bids, and he was very impressed with what they were calling for, what the standards were. He goes, we don't even do roofs like that. He goes, that's the big guys that do those. And he just kind of did a hip shot. He goes, no, that's going to be well over 750,000. He said, that's just my hip shot. And so when I saw these numbers, I thought, nah, that's probably about right then. And I think we need to move forward. I mean, I understand there might be some market pressures where maybe if we waited 2 more months, maybe we might be able to take advantage of some people that are hungry for work. But at the same time, I don't think that's good business. I think we just need to get a roof done. We had our 4 bids. we've got our low bidder, and I guess I support moving forward with it.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Geisler?
I would too, and I think, it's outdoors up on that roof. And you could socially distance a little bit on that roof as you're, doing some of the work, and it wouldn't not be mass congregation on the roof doing the work. And to me, keeping as much business as normal and keeping people employed and doing the things that need to be happening, I think is a good thing. And so with that, I will make a motion to adopt Resolution 20-37, amending the 2020 Facility Construction Fund budget for additional expenditures needed to replace the roof for the city center.
Second.
Motion by Geisler, second by Johnson. Further discussion?
Your Honor.
Councilmember Johnson?
So I would just say that, when I came on the council a little over 5 years ago, I started hearing about the need for the roof. It's something that staff has kept our council aware that was kind of a looming expense coming down the pike for a very long time. And it's right that it was something that was deferred from a prior year. And so, I've seen the evidence that we need a new roof on City Hall, and it's time, I think, to do that. And so I'm happy to support it. I also want to say one other thing, and that is that I understand sometimes that you can get into these issues of whether or not a prevailing wage policy gets you the best number on a competitive bid. Candidly, when I think about the time and circumstance that we're in right now, I couldn't be more proud to have a prevailing wage policy in the city of Coon Rapids. I don't think it's appropriate to be taking advantage of, and I'm not suggesting that anybody here is suggesting this, by the way. I don't want this to be misconstrued, but to be taking advantage of certain stresses in society like the one that we're facing now to try to get something on the cheap. And, you get what you pay for. And I expect that, I looked up McPhillips Brothers Roofing Company. I think that they sound like a good company, so I think we're getting a good company, like the mayor says, one of the kinds of companies capable of doing the big work. And we're going to be paying fair value for this roof, and we should stay on top of them and make sure we get a really good roof so we don't have to worry about it for a long time from now. So I'm happy to support this project.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Griscoviac?
Certainly didn't disagree with prevailing wage, and I think Mr. Himmer answered my question as to why this came in 25% higher than the average, the high average of a wage, so I'm good with that. And also, I do agree, it's a big piece of infrastructure, and the roofs typically last 12 to 15 years, so we've already got that much out of it. That, coupled with the fact that our facilities construction fund will be very healthy even after this expenditure, I think you've alleviated my concerns. I'll put it that way.
All right. Mrs. Lensmeyer, where are we at right now?
We have a motion and a second.
Thank you. I forgot to write it down, so I wasn't sure. All right, we have a motion and a second.
Real
Councilmember
quick, I
Wells.
just want to come at this from a different perspective. I have no problem with prevailing wage. What I do have a problem with, having been around the entire 25 years of this building, is low bid. In the end, low bid has cost us millions of dollars with this building. And I wish we would look into how we can maybe write specs or do things so we're not always, have to go with low bid. And I realize we do when they're qualified, and there's got to be a way to sometimes make these bids so that we can weed out some of these companies. I could name several things in this building that were done inadequately, and I'm sure the reason they got the contract was because of low bid. HVAC system just being one major one. And sometimes I think we need to do a better job of writing our specs or figuring out how we can get away with, like you say, you get what you pay for. And I know in my home, I don't always go for the cheapest contractor. I go for the best value. And sometimes our hands are tied, and I'd like to figure out a way that our hands aren't tied.
Well, in this case, as my buddy, the roofer, goes, he said they wrote very high stipulations on this
And
one.
I'm not
Yeah.
Yeah.
specifically saying
Yeah.
this, but like I said, when this building was built, I'm aware of some of the situations that really didn't work out too well for us.
Sure. All right, we have a motion and we have a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries. And on to item 8, I think we've probably already beat most of this out. but, consider resolution number 20-4 sub 9, awarding the contract for the city center roof replacement under an executed agreement for contract services, facility staff coordinated with Ketica LLC to develop plans and specifications for the replacement of the city center roof. Work will include replacement of approximately 61,000 square feet of the existing EPDM loose-laid ballasted roofing systems with a new built-up roofing system. The project also includes replacement of the roofing insulation, pre-finished sheet metal flashing, and drainage considerations. Council approved the plans and specs and ordered advertisement for bids on February 4th, 2020. The ad was published February 14th and 21st, and bids were opened on March 5th, and a summary of the bid is as follows. We had 4 bids from McPhillips, Central, John Dawson, and Commercial Roofing, and McPhillips Brothers Roofing was the low bidder, meets all project specifications, and has successfully completed comparable work in the past. The 2019 estimated and budgeted cost for installation were $1 million. Per a separate agenda item on tonight's meeting, we amended the budget to up $150,000 to cover the additional funds needed for construction and preparation of the required construction documents. Funds are available in the fund balance of the Facility Construction Fund. And if the contract is awarded, a pre-construction meeting will be held on April 2nd, 2020, and work will commence shortly thereafter. Councilmember Demmer.
Just one thing I wanted to clarify. Sometimes it says the city center and sometimes it says the city center complex. This is the entire building, the police, the middle part, and the civic center, correct?
To be clear, it is the entire building minus the dome.
Minus the dome. So, just for people following along at home, we're not spending $1 million for our own room. We're spending the money on police, we're spending the money on City Hall, and we're spending the money on the Civic Center, which is a place that citizens generally are able to congregate and do events. So I just always want to make sure when you spend a big ticket item that it's clear what the value is to everybody in the community, and there is value here that beyond just if it starts leaking all over the place, it'll cost more. This is a building that is used quite extensively, not just for council meetings. So, with that, if anyone is not going to say anything, then I will recommend the city council, I will move that the city council adopt resolution number 20-4 sub 9, awarding a contract to McPhillips Brothers Roofing Company in the amount of $1,057,220.00 for the 2020 City Center Complex Roof Replacement Project.
Second.
Motion by Demmer, second by Kicker. Discussion.
Mayor?
Councilmember Griscoviac.
To Councilmember Wells' point, which was a good one regarding the quality of the work, I was wondering, do we get references from this roofing contractor? You said they've done similar work. Do we actually go out and get references? And then secondly, do they offer any kind of warranty, and how long would it be?
Mr. Hammer?
Yes, Councilmember Griscoviac, council, our consultant does this roofing work. So he's worked with this contractor on
Okay.
other locations. So did I personally pull it? But between our facility operations manager and our consultant, yes, they're a reputable company. I can't lie to you and tell you I know what the warranty is, but it exists within the contract language and the specifications, and it would include a warranty. And I can go back and how about I fill you in on that information if it's something that won't affect your vote? Otherwise, I could go get it right now.
No, that sounds good, and I mean, I'm sure it all is within the scope of the work that the consultant provided, so thank you for that.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion carries. Our added agenda item this evening is item 9. And that is to, here we go. All right, let's see. So, this is called the mayor declaring local emergency in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and extending the period of the mayor declared local emergency. Under Minnesota statute, a local emergency may be declared only by the mayor of a municipality, and the local emergency may not be continued for a period in excess of 3 days, except by or with the consent of the city council. Given the recent developments, the mayor is going to execute the declaration of local emergency in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. While the city already has emergency authority under the governor's declaration as well as the president's, the mayor's declaration will confirm the use of our emergency management system, the ability to respond to the emergency outside normal channels, and may be helpful for future reimbursements due to expenses incurred as the result of this emergency. In addition, the declaration and consent resolution provides for the use of telephonic meetings under Minnesota statute. Requirements for holding a meeting via telephone or other electronic means include, there's four factors here. So we're looking to declare a local emergency in response to COVID-19, and we're looking for the council's authorization to consenting to the mayor's declaration of a local emergency. Mr. Brody, anything you want to
Yeah, I
add to
got
that?
a couple items, and then I'm going to turn it over, kind of tag team it with Chief Wise, who is our designated official here at the local level for our emergency response plan. We've kind of talked about sort of, the memo talks about sort of the legalities of this. It's a little bit unusual, it's usually if the mayor does issue a declaration, it usually comes just, at any point, and then the council meets a few days within those 3 days to meet. Here, given the time frame, and in some ways it's more efficient this way to have all our discussion in one day. I might have been a little presumptuous in saying the mayor's going to execute that. I presume the mayor's going to execute that. And that would be the first step. So if the mayor says, nope, then we don't need to get to the second discussion. If he does sign that, and I'd probably even have him sort of read that proclamation when we get to that point. And then, once we're done with that, we can get into consideration by the council to whether they want to consent to continuing that proclamation. I will turn it over to Chief Wise to sort of say what we believe this proclamation of the local emergency will do and what benefits it can provide to the city, and the advantages of that. Because I think, on its face, you may say, well, we're already sort of doing these things, which we are. But I think, like I said, Chief Wise gives a pretty good explanation as to its importance.
All right, Chief Wise.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just for you or for anybody who might be following along, we use the guidance of City Code 3-500 under emergency management. So if somebody wants to see some of the details, the way the ordinance was written, it might be helpful. Just to explain a little bit of background, obviously I work as the police chief. By policy, the city manager appoints an emergency management director. Our history is that the police chief serves in that role. And that would be regardless of this designation. It has been our history for a long period of time. The emergency management director continues to report to the city manager, and the city manager continues to respond to the desires of the council. That's the practical matter. Declaring a local emergency is really heavy sounding words. In reality, we're just talking about streamlining our administration. So the way it works as a practical matter, the governor has declared a state of emergency. My responsibility as the emergency manager is to carry out the orders of the governor, consistent with city policies and procedures. So I think the governor, the state of Minnesota in particular, has been a good example of how to do things the right way. I feel like we're on top of things here, both in the state, in our city. Specifically, however, by doing this or declaring this local emergency, streamlining would be, say, if we have to purchase items, we could go outside of the normal bidding process. And frankly, more importantly, the thing that I guess that I would say that I'm most concerned about, or the most beneficial thing by declaring a local emergency is, this is obviously is new territory for all of us. My experience is related to disasters. Typically, we're talking about floods when we talk about emergency management, or a tornado or something like that. And in order to get federal funds from the Federal Emergency Management Agency after a disaster has been completed, declaring a local emergency is usually a requirement. The FEMA requires you had done that and that you'd follow your progression through the state of Minnesota, and that in the end, the federal government will reimburse the city for its costs in addressing this emergency. Frankly, the way things stand right now is I don't expect there to be a significant expense to the city of Coon Rapids unless employees start getting sick on a widespread basis that might cause overtime to be able to provide continuity of services to our citizens. That matter, we were working very hard to make sure our employees don't get sick, especially our emergency responders, and we're taking aggressive action to keep that from happening. This social distancing that we're talking about is a big part of that. The other thing that the city attorney and I talked about is the ability of you to meet telephonically. I think we need to set an example and keep our social distance. And that would be a good way for the council to show leadership in saying that we agree with the idea that we're going to do all we can at the front end of this virus incident and try to model good behavior. Because frankly, we're asking our citizens to do much the same. The city of Coon Rapids will continue to operate all functions. However, we're going to want the citizens to try to stay at a distance. So for instance, City Hall itself for functions other than police and fire will be closed to public access, but that said, we're going to keep doing the functions that we're able to do. We just want people to do it by phone. So we're just going to try to think outside the box and get everything that needs to get done to keep our economy moving, to keep as much working as we possibly can. But just to have people appreciate that we're trying to not get sick and we're trying to not get other people sick. That's our primary goal. So we think this declaration, like I said, I can't emphasize it enough. It sounds really dire and heavy, the words, but in reality, we just want to be able, for instance, we're talking about purchasing laptops for employees to be able to work remotely. We have some, but we maybe need some additional. We would just like to do that outside of the normal procedure for getting them. So we're not talking about significant expenses in that regard. So I don't know, I had a bunch of notes, but I'm open to
All right.
questions because I'm
Chief
guessing you might
Wise,
have a bunch.
Mr. Brody, do you have something to add
I
there?
just had one follow-up. One thing we're working on, and we think we have it there on the technology on a meeting, what we're also concerned about is, hey, this is a public forum here, and we want the opportunity, and I think we're gonna try to have that opportunity where people can participate during the meeting, the public can, and in some cases, it's gonna be required if we have a public hearing for whatever reason. And obviously, it's our hope that maybe by April 7th, things are better. But we also want to be prepared if things are not. And so I think we're getting that technology, it's already in place. We're able, probably theoretically, even to conduct this meeting tonight by telephonic ways where people could participate outside of the council. And so I think that's another key piece that's there that we, have put into place. And so, and also, if we got City Hall closed, it is a little difficult to open it up for council meetings. And again, as Chief Wise, and we've been in constant contact with City Manager Mr. Stemwaddle, that, our goal is we still want to provide services to the public. It's our obligation, for one. It's going to change a little bit over these next few weeks, and it may be a few bumps as we try to figure out how to do that for some of our services. But obviously, our core ones, we're going to continue to maintain. Police, fire aren't going to change. Water, those kind of core ones are going to be there, and we're going to get some of the other little details figured out. But like I said, we're in constant conversation on that piece, and so that's, like I said, where we're at right now. And as Chief said, we're open to questions. Mr. Himmer would be as well to his operation as well.
Yeah, and it's important that we maintain that service to the residents and that we support our staff. And I think we would look kind of tone deaf when the Blaine City Hall and the other city halls are all locking down, and so that encouraging the phone access to try and keep their staff healthy and keep everybody healthy. I think we would look kind of tone deaf if we didn't lock down. Councilmember Demmer.
Yeah, so, with a national state of emergency and a state state of emergency, in some respects, it seems very obvious that we should call one, but it's also something probably none of us have ever voted for, so it is very appropriate, and thank you for asking for us to ask some questions, because So first one is, how does it end?
It will either end, we can take action here as a council to end it. It would end automatically upon the governor ending any state of emergency. So either of those two options.
Okay. I guess one thing I was considering is whether we set a limit by which we have to reauthorize it. I'm not saying we have to, because I didn't realize it ended because the governor ends the state one, so that helps.
That would be one way, and then, or like I said, we can come back and do it ourselves as well.
Yeah, a reauthorization is one option, just to make sure it isn't as indefinite, but I assume that as long as the state's in state of emergency, we'll probably need to be as a part of the metro.
And if,
The second thing, and I'm positive this is the case, but just want to make sure it was said out loud. Any of the purchasing that was done without normal authorization channels would still be public record and would still have
Oh, yeah.
post-event oversight. So just to make it clear to everyone at home, this is not an attempt to do things and hide them at all. It all is in the sunlight. And then third, we still will have city council meetings. And so for things that would not be emergency purchases, like, for example, this roof discussion, if this had happened after the state of emergency had been declared, you wouldn't just do it because there wasn't an emergency relation. We would still hold the regular votes for things that weren't time critical.
you got it. I mean, that's, regular business will be conducted. We'll have council meetings like we regularly do. They may look a little different, but they're gonna be, all of us will be present for them in some fashion, somewhere. And like I said, it's our hope that there will be ability for the public to participate in that as well.
And then I'd like to encourage us that we don't try to go live with the two-way meeting in a city council meeting. I don't know how we can test it while not violating open meeting laws, maybe test it with 3 people that are on the council or something, and then have somebody who's not on the council
Sure.
try to reply in, but please don't make it the first time we've tried it.
That'll be our hope as well. And again, to be clear, nobody's gonna be sitting in this room when we conduct that meeting.
Right.
Or unlikely that anybody will be sitting in this room.
And so your idea of trying to make sure people can participate, that's going to be an interesting challenge to that system that we'll definitely want to try out heavily before we open it up.
And we've already seen some from other cities who've done this already, and so there's
Good.
different ways, and we're hoping to have sort of again, we're in sort of our uncharted territory, as somebody mentioned, and so, but we're still hoping to have some sort of, I don't know if best practice is gonna be quite the right word, but have at least some options and hopefully be able to pick the best one.
And I think only one other thing, but as I was taking a look at the whereases, arranging for performance of public work, contracting, incurring obligations, employing temporary workers, renting equipment, purchasing supplies, materials, complying with limitations on tax levies, and appropriating funds. The employing temporary workers one struck me as one that seemed like one of the likely ones. So in the event that we need expanded ability to respond to 911 or something like that, I'm assuming that's the most likely use of that?
Yeah, Councilmember Denver, I can give you a perfect example from the county public health is, they contracted with recently retired public health employees to come back to work to enhance their strength. So that's a really good example of something that could potentially happen.
Okay. And normally we go through a pretty thorough vetting process, and I'm trying to always walk the line here between our normal process and the emergency process. Hiring a police officer without that vetting would be a difficult decision. I just wanted to see if you could walk us through how you'd make sure you'd get a good temporary person to do those sort of calls.
Sure, Councilmember Denver, frankly, I don't see that being even on the radar at all. Our staff is young and healthy as a whole. If they were exposed to the virus, we would expect that they would be away from work, they would heal, and then they would return to work. And so the way things are in Anoka County, we have mutual aid agreements. We've talked with the other police chiefs and the sheriff in the county, and so if one department happened to have more sickness than another, is that mutual aid compacts would kick in and then we'd support each other. Frankly, I can't imagine there being a need to expand our staff. If that should become a need, it'll be apparent to everybody. It'd just be common sense because it would be something that would be widespread. But we have our planning is, our worst-case scenario planning is for a third of our staff to be down sick, where they're not able to work, and that we can function on a third of our staff. It just might cost more overtime, but it wouldn't be
Yeah.
different human beings.
I guess the one thing I would consider is that when breakouts occur, they tend to break out in regions. So if a lot of our staff was sick, chances are a lot of Blaine's would be sick too. It might be worth exploring with people from regions that weren't directly neighbors. So whether there's a Duluth, some groups that maybe would be able to come if there was a lot. And again, we're talking third issues here, but just something to consider before things get bad, or, in case things got bad, right?
So noted.
I think I can still find my uniform.
Young, healthy.
Yeah.
Except you're one of the risk carriers.
Mr. Brody?
The only thing I want to add is obviously these are very fluid situations. It was, I think, last Thursday that the NCAA called off the basketball tournament. That seems like a lifetime ago in some respect. I'm sure some will say, are we overreacting? I guess we don't think we are. We think we're being, I think Chief Wise pointed out, we're just trying to keep our employees safe. We're trying to keep our citizens safe. We're trying to, I guess, flatten the curve, if we're going to use that kind of terminology. And so we just think these are additional steps to allow us to do that. And frankly, we believe we're carrying out the governor's orders, and so that's our goal here.
Your Honor, might I just dovetail off of that just briefly? Sure. I want to give the public a little bit of an insight into how, frankly, remarkable the community that we live in is. It was back on January 22nd, when there was a meeting of the Joint Law Enforcement Council, and Chief Wise and Councilmember Wells are the representatives of the Joint Law Enforcement Council. And the topic of what was then called just the Wuhan coronavirus didn't even have the COVID-19 label to it, was brought up at that meeting. Within a couple of days, there was a Fire Protection Council meeting. Now, this is important to know what these things are, because Joint Law Enforcement Council is a meeting of the sheriff, the county attorney, and all the chiefs of police in the entire county. And so they were having a conversation about the community and their departments and their cities at that point in time. A couple days later, the fire chiefs are having a similar conversation at their point in time. It was then in late January that the topic was raised at our workshop to ask our staff to look into communicating with the courts where necessary, look at the various departments, and that has been a day-by-day gradual progression to get ready for the place where we are here today. I can tell you, in contrast to other surrounding communities, some of which I'm quite familiar with, we were so far out in front of this issue in comparison to other units of government that I have repeatedly reached out to, for example, Chief Piper with the fire department, and said, is there anything else that you feel you need? And they've just always been responsive to that and are working on it. And I also have reached out to the city manager, and I've reached out to other members on the council to get ideas from them. This declaration of emergency, which follows the governor's declaration, is a natural progression along that line. It is something that was contemplated as something that might be necessary going forward, and there may be other steps that are necessary to take. But I do want to say to staff and to the public at large, I really couldn't be more happy as to how our local units of government have looked at this issue, especially in comparison to others in the surrounding community. So I hope we all can support this and get behind it. I can tell you that I don't want it to last any longer than it's necessary. So I had the same thought when I read through it the first time. When is it going to end? Why is it indefinite? I can tell you why it's indefinite, because there's a comfort level with us that we're going to end it when the time is right. And it'll be a constant conversation that we'll be having, whether or not the governor ends it at a particular point in time, because I don't think any of us is reflected by the fact that we're here, want to do it this other way. We like interfacing with the public, And we like having these meetings in this forum as opposed to in the alternative forum. So I look forward to a time when we can return to this chamber and have business as usual in the city, but I intend to support this.
City of Ramsey just declared theirs.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Brody, do I need to read all this, or what do I need to do?
Maybe, I'm sorry.
It's the last time you're gonna be able to do it at a mic.
I'm not gonna make you come down
Knock
here like
yourself
you
out.
normally do with your proclamations.
All right, okay.
Mayor?
Councilmember Griscoviac?
Before you read that, and I'll preface this by saying that the health and the safety of everybody, everyone on the city staff and our constituents is of the utmost importance, of course. And as the mayor, you have the authority to call this declaration of emergency at any time. It doesn't have to be tonight, and, you know, and all that. And so my question is, we are, to Councilmember Johnson's point, we are very, very well prepared for this. All the way around. Prepared, we have the resources. We are not in a critical position right now. If we should get to a critical position, the mayor can certainly call the state of emergency, and then that actually invokes all of those special powers that are described, meeting remotely and all that. We have 3 days then to ratify it, to go on longer. I guess what I'm saying is, I don't really agree with this motion at this time, and the reason being, I think we all need to keep calm in the community. The federal government, the government declarations, the state, the county, and we're working within those parameters already that actually give us most of the powers that we would need in an emergency. So I guess my biggest thing here is that I would like to just instill a sense of calm, and we've got this under control regardless of state of emergency declaration at this time.
Well, and I concur as far as, I think everybody's been remarkably calm through this. I was in here on Friday afternoon and had a meeting with city manager, the city attorney, police chief, public works director, and everybody. I mean, everybody is so prepared for this. And I just think this is just the next step that we have to take to give them the tools they need to be able to react. You know, if they need more computers, if they need whatever they need, I think they need to be able to make those decisions without calling us together to make a decision on it. And I think that it's fluid, and I think that this gives them that authority. I also like the fact that if there's a way to get reimbursed for some of these things, the state of the emergency makes us eligible for that. So, Chief Wise, and then.
Mr. Mayor, and I'll tell you, that's really a key point, because we're already tracking costs, because we have had costs already directly related to this. So, for example, we have one police officer who had a exposure to a person of interest, meaning just a sick person, and we place that person on administrative leave. We're tracking that time that they're not working, but the employee is going to get paid, and that would be a perfect example of a cost we would like to be reimbursed for as a city, especially if the federal government gives us that opportunity. So in truthfully, I guess we just looked at it, it's better to declare and not need than to later need it and then come back to you and then have you date it retroactively. It just winds up to be, to me, it winds up being a paperwork thing. We've been lucky in Coon Rapids that we haven't had a significant flood in a long period of time. We had a rain event that we recovered some costs, but there are always administrative things that the federal government wants and needs and expects. And it's just nice to have all those T's crossed and I's dotted in advance, and it makes it really tidy. And that's my perspective too, because I totally agree with Councilmember Griscoviac. Calm professionalism is what's required at this moment, and that's what we're trying to do. And it's heavy sounding language. I don't like the way it sounds either, because it feels like an overreaction when we're just talking about administrative stuff. But the reality is there'll be some accountant in Washington, D.C. that will say, where's your copy of your local declaration of an emergency? And then we come scrambling back to you to have you do one that's dated retroactively or something like that. That's the kind of thing that will happen.
Mayor?
Hang on, Councilmember Demmer, you had your hand up? Or did?
The biggest thing, just counting the people in the room, even with the skeleton crew, and we're at 12. And we can't have 20 people show up and still be under 10. You know, I think that one of the things that this does is this allows us to do public meetings where we don't put a bunch of people in a room. And both the federal and the state response are asking people to limit, today's was limit to groups of 10. I don't know that it was absolutely necessary that you have to do an emergency declaration to do everything trans-telephonically. However, between the allowing people to contribute, allowing the open meetings, and the, quite frankly, if our next council meeting is 2 weeks away, in some countries, 3 weeks away, in some countries, things have gone very badly within a period of a week or two. So I do think the ability to react quickly is important. And again, I think that once the state's already declared the state of emergency, this is simply allowing our local groups to execute the state of emergency that's already been handed to them. So I would support it as is, and I would also ask that we all keep a close eye on when to end it.
Coming back to you, Councilmember Geisler.
Yeah, and I'll echo some of the other things that people are saying. And what I've been hearing and watching from the experts at the federal level, they all say speed is of the essence, not perfection. And the ability to have speed is the ability to say, okay, I need to do this, and the staff would be able to do that execution now versus saying, oh, okay, now I have to go get the mayor, have him declare something, and then get that speed can make a difference. And so for me to say, now's the right time to say, let's get things in place before there's something that they need to react to immediately and don't have the ability to do that. That's, to me, the key of why we start to do this and put things in place to make ourselves prepared and ready to be able to handle the things that come at us without having to go backwards and do administrative work.
And I agree wholeheartedly with Councilmember Geisler on that. I consulted with the National League of Cities today, and Mr. Brody, maybe you can clarify, but it is my understanding that a statewide declaration of emergency actually grants us as a municipality certain rules, suspended rules, such as the emergency spending, such as the ability to close our facility already without this next level. So can you confirm or?
I believe that probably is accurate. We've relied on state emergencies before, but I guess this is just to ensure, this is different. I mean, it has a different feel to it. We want to make sure that we have covered every possible angle that we can. We want to make sure that we have an opportunity, we could have an opportunity for some local control here. If we think that things can be done differently at a local level, we don't anticipate that. We generally follow what the state is recommending, but maybe there's something specific to us. And we don't talk about that much because that's not our intent. Our intent is to follow the lead of the state. But there may be some special particular piece here that maybe this will help us out in that. If we want to do something differently that's unique to us or we feel is important to us. And again, I'm not trying to put fear into anybody. And maybe in some ways we're just simply doing what we already have the authority to do. But I just think that it isn't going to hurt us in any fashion either. And like I said, the telephonic meeting is separate from that, and that needs to be, if we want to do that, would need to go forward. And it's the same rationale for both, so that's why they're put together.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and read this now.
I've changed my mind.
You change your mind. What do I have to do?
If you just want to say that you're going to declare the emergency as so stated, I think we're comfortable with that. It's going to be, if it does go through, it'll be posted online.
All right.
Like I said, I just think that that's probably
Okay.
the best angle.
All right, so I guess I'm not, all right. Well, so, all right, so then I will, all right, so as the mayor, I am going to declare a local emergency in response to COVID-19 pandemic. And then we'll be looking, What do you?
You've done it.
I've done it.
So
Okay,
now-
all right.
And then
I would
Mr.
just
Mayor?
note,
Now we've got 3 days.
If you
Oh,
want
no.
to bang your gavel, you can.
Yeah. So, or I would say, Mr. Mayor, in
Councilmember
response
Geisler?
to that, I would make a motion to authorize resolution number 20-38, consenting to mayor's declaration of local emergency, extending the period of local emergency and authorizing certain actions.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Geisler, second by Kicker. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Griscovi.
I would just wanted to add another clarifying question for our
Yeah.
legal counsel
Sure.
here. And it's to Brad Weiss's question or point about costs being paid back by FEMA. Again, the statewide declaration of emergency, wouldn't that automatically enroll us for reimbursement from the federal level?
we believe so,
Okay.
but we're not, like I said.
All right.
This
And
one,
again, I just,
Your Honor.
I mean, I know it's a very, very tough time that we're in, but I just want to instill calm. There's only been 60 people with the disease in Minnesota. I think many more than that are probably undetected and having mild symptoms. But I believe that a broad expansion, an emergency declaration at the city is not warranted at this time.
I don't think it's gonna make a nickel's worth of difference to the people here if we declare this after the state and the federal government have already declared it, but that's just my opinion. Councilmember Wells.
I don't think it's an overreaction. It is dotting the i's and crossing the t's. And as a former emergency manager for the city, I know that we had to put in money individually, to FEMA. You do it as the city of Coon Rapids, and right or wrong, they're gonna be throwing around money from both the federal and state levels, and we need to document and get our piece of the pie, and this is important part of the process to do that.
Okay. Further discussion?
Your Honor.
Councilmember Johnson.
Councilmember Griscoviac brought up the League of Minnesota Cities. I would just note that they just closed their building as a result of COVID-19, but they also have out there COVID-19 peacetime emergency executive order, frequently asked questions. So they go through what is a peacetime emergency and what should a city do in response to the executive order. And the advice that the League of Minnesota Cities gives in response to that question is cities should follow their local emergency management plans and work with the state when requested. And then it goes on to explain various ways of doing that. Should our city still hold public meetings, city should review recommendations from the Minnesota Department of Health related to public meetings, look at the appropriate statutes, and go on. And then it follows the process. So there is a process that is laid out for this, and this declaration is consistent with that process. And I think it is not only recommended, but it's best practice. And one thing that the city has been doing since I indicated before, early in January, and frankly, many of the cities in Anoka County since early in January have been preparing for this moment. We all wish that we wouldn't have gotten here. I mean, I would have loved that, when it was, I believe it was 19 at one point in time late last week, and now we're at 60. And so I think we are here for that point, and I intend to support it. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Griscoviac?
Just a clarification, I did check with the National League of Cities and the Minnesota League of Cities, and neither one of them has a recommendation for municipalities to call a local state of emergency at this time. Now, I know there's cities across the country that have, there are pockets of, in New York, for example, it's really bad. So far in Minnesota, 12 of 853 cities have done so.
Okay, thank you. Any other, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
The motion passes, one abstention, or one nay, one opposed. Councilmember Griscoviac. Does it have to be unanimous?
no.
You never said. Oh, good. All right, and we are on open mic, I'll bet. Where's our agenda here? Yes, we're at open mic. Are you here for open mic?
I'm just here to learn.
No kidding. Here, I was feeling guilty that you were waiting for open mic. Nice social distancing.
That's it, 6 feet.
6 rows, yeah. All right. So then, we don't have any reports on previous open mics, and we are at other business. Councilmember Demmer?
So one thing I just wanted to do is talk a little bit about the virus situation and just really thank everyone for taking it seriously without panicking, right? That it's a tough combination to walk the line between treating something really seriously but still treating it calmly, and you know, I see many fewer people out. I think most people are staying within their house and doing things. And I want to bring up why I think that's important. Everybody needs time, right? The companies that make ventilators need time to make more ventilators. The people that are working on vaccines need time to get the vaccines. You know, we're not going to cure the virus by staying home. It's not going to just disappear, but if we're able to keep it from spreading, then we may be able to beat it with time. And so as much as it's, you know, hard to just be sort of stuck in your house for, you know, a period of time that's not totally clear to anybody, what you're doing is you're buying the people who are experts at this enough time to come up with solutions that hopefully are able to work for everybody. So I do just want to encourage people to keep following that, even if it's not the most fun they've ever had in their life. But it matters. It matters a lot, especially for people who are in vulnerable groups. And so thank you. You know, thank you for everybody who's following this and doing their best. And the best case scenario is 5 years from now we look back and say, wow, we totally overreacted. But it's that staying home that might cause it to not end up being a big deal. And we've certainly seen countries where they look back and wish they had taken action sooner. So the tough part is knowing when to take action. And unfortunately with this, where the symptoms don't show up for quite a while, the right time to take action is before you know you need to. It's a very difficult thing when you don't see any signs or symptoms to sit at home. And again, just want to thank everyone for doing their best, because I really do think you are protecting a lot of people who really have no other way to be protected. So I encourage the remain calm. I encourage the remain home. Thank you.
I just want to read some updates here from the city of Coon Rapids. The city staff is taking numerous steps to respond to the coronavirus or COVID-19 outbreak by closing facilities, suspending programs, large events, recreation programs through May 11th for now, communicating with residents on the city website through email lists, social media, and an after-hours phone message refers people to the website for current information. The situation is rapidly evolving. Your best source of information about changes to city facilities, programs, and services is on the city's website, www.coonrapids.mn.gov/coronavirus. It has the most up-to-date information about changes affecting Coon Rapids. Check back often as the situation evolves. Starting today, March 17th, after this meeting, all city facilities are closed to the public until further notice. We have said until March 30th right now, but will continually reevaluate the situation. This includes City Hall and Public Works, Civic Center, Ice Center, Recycling Center, Bunker Hills Golf Club, and Kendall's Tavern and Chop House is expected to reopen at 5 p.m. March 27th, but we'll see. The police department is open, however, for customer service from 7 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Despite buildings being closed to the public, city staff are still available to help you. Call 763-755-2880. That's the main switchboard number here, 763-755-2880, or contact staff by email, and it's again mail@coonrapidsmn.gov. All essential city services will continue as usual: water, sewer, police and fire response, If residents have flu-like symptoms, they are encouraged to contact their medical provider or 24-hour nurse line. Some city services have been modified, such as residential building inspections have been put on hold for now. Only commercial inspections will be completed. Water meters are not being installed in homes. Again, check the city's website for the most up-to-date information about specific details. Many city services are available online as it relates to e-permits, requesting police reports, paying utility bills, city code information, etc., and many more items. Just search what you are looking for. These decisions were carefully considered based on guidelines from the state and federal government, and we are working collaboratively with Anoka County and other local governments to provide a coordinated response. The situation continues to change rapidly. Staff is closely following state and federal information to determine when normal activity and services will resume. And please stay home whenever possible, practice good hygiene and hand washing, and watch our website closely for continued updates. Again, that's www.coonrapidsmn.gov/coronavirus. And then, as a response to our local businesses, it's important to know that our city staff is in the process of assembling potential resources to help our business community manage through the COVID-19 crisis. By tomorrow, we should have information on the city's webpage with links to various resources through the state of Minnesota. We also received information this afternoon from Congressman Dean Phillips' office on Small Business Administration Economic Injury Loan Assistance that was passed by Congress earlier this week. More details will be available in the coming days. Lastly, we also know that the city's temporary suspension of building inspections is creating challenges for our customers, and we are still looking for solutions to meet those demands under very difficult circumstances. Again, and our website will continue to be a source of information for our businesses and residents concerning the city's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and we appreciate the public's patience. That's all I have. Any questions from council? Any other comments? Any other business?
I guess, Your Honor, I'd like to say one thing as well. You know, we've all experienced this in different ways, and we all have our own kind of personal things going on and our professional things going on, and then this happens, and it creates a lot of stress. And we've all seen the news and the runs on the grocery stores and the runs on, you know, essential things that people need and want. I detect a little bit in the community of frustration with that, where people, because they're under a lot of stress, are critical of other people. And I want to give just a little example to highlight it, and then I want to just suggest a way to kind of think about it. So I was at Aldi the other day. I needed bread, and the kids wanted cheese because we were making pizzas that night. And there was a woman who I would estimate was probably in her 80s who was there. She bought 6 gallons of milk. And many of the surrounding people were very upset that she was grabbing 6 gallons of milk out of the refrigerator or the freezer. And as it turns out, what she was doing was buying milk for her nursing home. So I think it's time that we all step back a little bit, do what Councilmember Griskowiak is recommending to everyone, be calm about it, have patience with one another, but also do what this lady was doing, which is look after your neighbors, look after other people that are in need. She was in an assisted living kind of situation, so she could go out and was getting things for other people who couldn't. And just think along those lines. We are fortunate to live in extraordinarily generous and helpful community, and now is the time when I think we can really show each other how good of neighbors we are. So I just wanted to leave people with that little thought and that little experience I had. Thank you.
Mayor,
Councilmember Griskowiak.
if I might just add, I mean, we all understand that our responsibility is to keep all of our constituents healthy and safe. And I am very confident that our city is in a very good position to do that. We're very well prepared, and there is no reason to be other than calm through this whole thing.
Mr. Brody?
Your Honor, we've had a lot of COVID-19 conversation today, obviously, as I was just looking at our website, which is filled with all that information. One thing, and you probably got it in your mail this week, and maybe this is it, something that you can do while you're stuck in your house is Census 2020. You may have got that mail in. So as long as you're at home and you're saying there's nothing to do, you probably are getting your notice this week, and that's one thing that we could do, and it's a very important thing for the good city of Coon Rapids, that each of our residents fills that out and responds, and you can do that online, by phone, or by mail. It doesn't require any contact with any human being. And that would also save, I assume, in the future when somebody, if you don't respond and they have to send somebody out to your house,
point.
do that. So that would even help out that in the future. So I just thought it was a nice way to sort of end our COVID-19 conversation.
I'd actually like to draw Mr. Hemmer into this for just a moment. Mr. Hemmer, on Friday afternoon, you provide some great assurances about our water supply in town, because it seems like people are stocking up on toilet paper, for whatever reason, for this respiratory disease, and fresh water. Bottled water. And you're going, you have a tap at home. I use the tap. Mr. Hemmer, can you give us just a little glimpse into the backups and the reason we're probably going to continue to have fresh water?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Council, water is safe, it's filtered, it's there. In addition to having 2 plants in 2 different energy provider areas, they're all manned independently. They're much like the police and fire, they're locked down, no additional people in and out of there. They're reporting directly to that. So each one has a plant operator. We've got 2 additional on staff that can assist with that. We've got neighboring communities that we've partnered with. We've got consultants that have worked through this filter media that we have. We're probably 6 or 7 deep in how that can be manned as we do that, and potentially even remotely if that ever came to that point. But from a water standpoint, we've got plenty of water to drink.
I've always gotten a kick out of the people who drink the bottled water, when I think our waterman has described it as 10,000-year-old glacier water that we're drinking through our taps.
I've asked at the utility billing counter to, put a empty hose out, that this is a water fill station and you can get 20 gallons for a nickel. Yeah. And they go, what a deal. And you go, yes, go home and fill it out of your tap, because that's how much you get for a nickel at home. I will like to say one additional thing on the sewer side is we always have issues with flushables, and with more Clorox wipes, with more of that item out there, we're already starting to see that show up in some of our lift stations and pumps, and trying to manage that. That is something that be very cautious about where you dispose of those things. Flushing them down the toilet is not going to help anybody. Put them in your trash can, send them out with everything else that goes out in the waste. But that's something we've already started to see increase recently, is more rags, more wipes, more considered flushable type things that are going to create problems.
Yeah, that does cost the city real money.
And time and resources. Although I think I'm going to go out and buy a bunch of plungers for all the people that have the toilet paper, and then we'll trade.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hammer. Any other business to come before council this evening?
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Motion by Demmer, second by Kicker to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, we're adjourned.